There are many different parts of a transition plan. First, you start with a secondary transition plan page in probably your IEP software. Um, in that secondary transition plan page, there's transition assessments where you talk about the assessments that that student has done, post-secondary outcomes, their course of study throughout their 4-year or more high school career, and transition services that that student will need. Then you move on using all the information in the secondary transition plan to formulate your transition goals and objectives. First, you write present levels based on the information you've gathered in talking with the student and in the transition assessments, and you create goals that relate to the outcomes. These goals must follow the SMART format and have at least 2 objectives each. You will also then do a indicator 13 checklist to ensure that your transition plan is in compliance. Later, if the student is a senior or exiting high school, you would also complete the summary of performance, which is only when a student exits high school. And then lastly, a year after exiting, you would complete the indicator 14 if your school is chosen by ISB and follow a script that they provided. To use age-appropriate transition assessments, you should first get to know your student. A good way is to use a transition survey. That survey should give you some background information on what the student likes, their preferences, their interests, their needs, their challenges, things like that. The goal is to understand your student, and in understanding the student, you should gather information regarding their education, strengths, needs, challenges, employment as it relates to training if it's needed, and then again in independent living. You should interview your student and parent if possible, asking age-appropriate questions to gather your information. Grade level surveys are a great way to ask open-ended questions and get to know your student or parent. You can send home a parent survey to gain another perspective. It's very valuable because a student may say that they're interested in pursuing welding. However, they might not really be sure, and that's just what they're saying, but a parent might know more. After analyzing their responses, you would choose a transition assessment that's related, and it'll help provide you with more details. For example, if the student says that they want to pursue college, to determine how a student learns best, you might utilize a learning styles assessment to help build your transition education goals so that they are successful in maybe attending college. If they want to, for example, become a welder, then you could use a career cluster inventory survey to make sure that their actual interests align to being a welder. Maybe they might not know. The career cluster inventory survey may help you figure that out with the student. There are many different types of transition assessments. To get together overall or comprehensive information, you can do things like the Casey Life Skills, a student dream sheet, or the survey that your school may have developed themselves. That will give you the general information. Then, after gathering that general information, you can do further transition assessments in education, employment, and independent living to give you more information. An example of an education type transition assessment is there's many different types of learning styles assessments. Those include the SITE learning styles, perceptional learning style preference questionnaire, my work learning style. In employment, you may use a career investigation report, a what's your passion form, or a wanna grow up survey. In independent living, some examples include the life skills inventory, determining the need for independent living post-secondary goals, and assessments for financial skills and abilities. So for example, if a student tells you, when I grow up, I want to live alone, but I don't really know how to manage my money or pay bills, then maybe an assessment of financial skills and ability is appropriate. There are many different types of transition assessments. They're prolific over the internet. You can find them with a simple Google search, but please use peer-reviewed and reliable assessments that are recommended, because if your school creates one, it might not be valid. There's many different resources on the internet, and a lot of organizations have comprehensive lists for you to choose from. In writing post-secondary outcomes, you should consider the following. These post-secondary outcomes should reflect the dreams, aspirations, and hopes of a student, reflect their strengths, preferences, and interests as they relate to transition from school to post-school activities. They should be written to the greatest extent possible in the student's own words. They should be reviewed and updated at least annually because, as we all know, students change their mind all the time about what they want to do with their life. They should become increasingly specific as the student comes closer to the time they will be exiting school, because they should, at that point, a student would likely start to know more about their goals. If you talk to them as a freshman, it might be very different when you talk to them as a senior. So as the student progresses in high school, those outcomes should be updated and become more increasingly specific. They should be developed with the direct student involvement. So in these conversations and in doing these transition assessments, you should develop those post-secondary outcomes with them. They should be written in a way as to guide the development of annual goals and recommendations for transition services, linkages, and activities. And they should be based upon the age-appropriate transition assessments that you have done with the student. To write post-secondary outcomes, a suggested formula would be, after high school, so-and-so will do X, where and how they will then do X. So for example, upon completion of high school, Jessica will enroll in local community college to pursue an associate's degree. Now that would be an appropriate post-secondary outcome should that student want to attend college. Notice that we use upon completion of high school. That indicates that this outcome is aspirational and something that they will do after leaving high school. A course of study would also then be related to those students' needs and wants. So they should include things like academic courses that will help them in what they want to do, selected courses that relate specifically to their interests. So if they want to be a welder, maybe they take welding if your school takes or offers those types of courses. These courses should also be the ones that include graduation requirements. So if your student needs all 4 years of PE should be listed 4 times. Also, they should be specific. You should use the course titles that your school uses. So instead of saying the generic English, you might use English 4 or film studies or reading and writing or whatever your school uses to describe that particular course. They should be progressive. And so if you start in freshman year, it would be maybe English 9, PE 1, world history, things like that. And then as they progress throughout the schools or the students, schooling, then by senior year, it might be English 12 and forensic science rather than biology or just a generic science title. They should always, always, always be specific. Use the course names as it relates.